Next up, we have Jessica Batke, senior editor at ChinaFile and an expert on human rights in China. As the mainland information environment becomes even more closed, how researchers are able to document human rights abuses in places like Xinjiang is getting more important and more difficult. So Jessica, thank you so much for speaking with us. I'm going to turn over to you.
Thanks so much for having me here. I'm not going to focus on the contours of the crisis that Rose just mentioned. Hopefully it's really well known. There are what the Chinese government euphemistically calls forced re-education camps. There's forced labor in factories. There's omnipresent surveillance. There's forced sterilizations and family separations. All of these are being perpetrated against Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, many of whom identify as Muslims. What I'm going to focus on today is how we actually know that this is happening, despite that the Chinese government would have you believe that everyone in the region is just living their best lives. What kind of evidence do we have that these sorts of crimes against humanity are taking place? There's so much of it, but I think it falls into 5 major categories. First, we have the government's own say-so, and this includes things like procurement documents. So if the government, say, wants to build a re-education camp, they go through a public procurement process where they post, hey, we're looking to build these things and we need some construction services. There's other sorts of government documents and official government say-so as well. We have official government statistics that includes population data, that includes data about prosecutions. And we also have the Chinese government's own state media and social media accounts. They have detailed how they're sending people from one part of Xinjiang to factories in another. They have detailed how cadres stay in people's homes to surveil them. So they are telling this themselves. The second type of evidence we have is the unintentional government say-so, and that I'm including in that leaked government documents or databases. So we have lists of people in an area called Karakash. We know who was detained and why they were detained. We have a massive surveillance system from the regional capital in Urumqi, so we know how people are being surveilled and why. And we also have things like instructions that higher ups in Xinjiang and in the central government were handing down to local officials. How do you talk to family members of people that have been detained in these camps? Third kind of evidence is international reporting and research. So despite the Chinese government's best efforts, there has been some really great international independent reporting taking place in the region that has witnessed the kind of surveillance that's happening, that has witnessed the shutdown of mosques, and that has borne witness to all the different sorts of things that are happening in the region. And if you can't even get there, we also have people who are still able to get information by just picking up the phone and calling. Radio Free Asia is really famous for this. They call up local police stations and ask, you know, have you detained this person in particular? Or they've asked about quotas. Are you forced to detain a certain number of people? We've gotten a lot of information that way. Fourth, we have satellite imagery. And this has allowed us to see a variety of different things, but really importantly, the build out and expansion, and in some cases, closing down of these re-education camps. We're also able to see from the sky light, so we can tell at night whether, you know, some of these things are still functioning, how many people might be in them. We can use all of these mechanisms to estimate how many people might be in these facilities. And the satellite can also show us about the demolition of mosques, of cemeteries, and other holy and community sites. And fifth, we have witness testimony. Now, this is harder to get because there's not a lot of people who necessarily went through any one of these things that have been able to leave China and are willing to speak out about it. And that's because they may not feel safe themselves, or they may be concerned about their family members still in China facing reprisals if they speak out. Even given all of that, Amnesty International just compiled a report of 50 witness testimonies that talks about all sorts of facets of this crisis. So we in fact have tons of information about this crisis, and we know what's happening, but we can't go in and out freely. We can't go in and say, count the numbers of detainees in any given camp. So we're just kind of stuck estimating how many people might be detained. And this, you know, that kind of estimation goes for just about everything I've already mentioned, with the exception maybe of leaked internal government documents that give precise numbers of people being detained. And this gets at the difference between reliability and precision. Reliability is whether or not we can believe something is true. The preponderance of evidence clearly shows that we can confidently say, yes, this campaign against Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples is actually happening and includes all of these facets. What we can't know is exactly how many people are locked up and where. We can't know exactly how many children have been separated from their parents. In other words, we cannot be precise. And that is the point of the Chinese government's efforts to limit independent international access to the region. By shutting out most independent journalists and observers, or by only allowing them access to carefully controlled and stage managed areas, the Chinese government not only limits the precision of the information getting out, but it also has the means to question the reliability of that information. Essentially, they can say, how can you know? You're not here. The irony, of course, is that many people would be there if they could be. Nobody wants to be using these remote methods of covering the crisis. This is a corner that we've all been backed into by the Chinese government's policies. And to fill in this supposed information void, the Chinese government is pumping out propaganda. Some of it is admittedly more successful than others, but this propaganda plays off the notion that, they're really on the ground. It often includes videos and interviews of what are almost certainly forced appearances by Uyghurs whose family members have been speaking out abroad. The New York Times published a wonderful article about this just yesterday. And the propaganda machine cleverly frames China as the victim of a Western conspiracy to keep it oppressed internationally. The propaganda, of course, does not mention the millions of people that it itself is silencing and oppressing. And with that, I'll hand it back off to Graham in the studio.